Alrighty. Well, welcome everybody. This is the August version of our VLab Forum. It's an opportunity for us to get together and showcase some projects that have R2O implications. And today's talk will feature a presentation by Jason Burks. He's a co-worker of mine here at MDL, Decision Support Branch. And he'll be talking about the AWIPS Reference Training plugin. And I was really excited to hear about this topic because it represents sort of a departure from some of our talks where we have a new or enhanced model or a new or enhanced product, something that affects sort of a small portion of the overall forecast process. But Jason's talk, I think, really has the potential to affect the entire forecast process. So I think that gives us some reason for a little bit of excitement. The other aspect of the talk, which seemed kind of novel and really kind of exciting, is this idea of this project seems to leverage the virtual lab, not only to foster a collaboration, but also as a way to directly impact the forecast process. So with that introduction, I will now turn it over to Jason. And in so doing, mention that we will be recording this, so if you would like to refer it to one of your coworkers, it'll be posted to the Virtual Lab Forum community following our meeting. And with that, take it away, Jason.
Okay, thanks, John. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you quite well.
Okay, good. So as John said, we're going to be talking about the AWIPS Reference Training plugin, and in the past, this has been referred to as a just-in-time training plugin. I guess I don't have very good skill at picking good names for my plugins before they get baselined. But as a part of baselining this plugin, which was originally called the just-in-time training plugin, it got renamed to the AWIPS Reference plugin. So it's actually not the AWIPS Reference Training plugin either. But anyways, you may have heard about this maybe through some different channels, I don't know. So if you've heard about it as a just-in-time training plugin, it's the same as that. So a little bit of history on this project. So I'm new to MDL. I used to be at NASA Sport, which is a group here in Huntsville that does R2O kind of operations. During my work at NASA Sport, I worked on a lot of different plugins, AWIPS2 plugins, including tracking Meteogram and some other plugins. But one of the plugins that I started working on was this just-in-time training plugin. Originally, I proposed this plugin at the 2005 NOAA Satellite User Readiness meeting, which was held in Kansas City. And you know, I was kind of talking about different ideas about, you know, how AWIPS2 is this extensible architecture, and, you know, we have now, you know, basically replaced black box the AWIPS2 architecture, and now we're moving into areas where, you know, we're providing new and additional functionality that wasn't there before. And, you know, tracking Meteogram was one of those things. You know, data delivery is maybe another. And then, you know, I could go on because, you know, now we're getting into the real interesting part of plugin development, and that we're starting to see things that are really going to add big new features onto this. So I threw out this idea of taking training or reference material for various different products that people use and integrating it into AWIPS. So I proposed that at that satellite meeting, and the SSD chiefs who were there really were excited about it. So they kind of give the thumbs up, and so we started working on it at Sport. And I developed a prototype, and I had demoed that prototype to a lot of different people. And while demoing that prototype, a lot of people said, wouldn't it be cool if it did this, if it did that? And so so I added on features that were kind of, you know, given to me by, you know, showing it to different people in the prototype phase. And that really helped to kind of mature the product and I have to give a lot of thanks to the people who provided that feedback because it really made the product better. So, so then we took this, kind of more mature prototype, and we tested it at the Operations Proving Ground in spring of 2016. That was this March, and we tested it in 3 separate different testings, and I'll talk a little bit about the results. So then in May, I moved from Sport over to MDL, so now I'm continuing development of this tool, and then we're also working very closely with WDTD to make sure that we fulfill what is needed for with regard to reference and training and things like that. So I didn't know, I wanted to make sure that if there were people out there that didn't know what AWIPS was, we could talk about that a little bit. But AWIPS is the Advanced Weather Information Processing System. Essentially, it's the ingest, visualization, forecast creation tool of the National Weather Service. So, and then there's a picture over there of a 4-panel display of some radar data, both reflectivity, velocity, some lightning data, whatnot. So anyways, it has the ability of bringing together a whole bunch of different data sets into one place. And if you've ever used AWIPS, the amount of data that is available within AWIPS is staggering. There's a lot of different data in there, and new data is added every day, and the data changes, of course, sometimes numerical models become higher resolution, or new fields are added or whatnot, and that's just a lot of stuff going on the system. So AWIPS basically consists of 2 pieces. One is called EDEX, and that's really the backend or the ingest system, the backend ingest and interface with the data sets that are on the main servers. And then the other part is called CAVE, and CAVE is the visualization portion of AWIPS. And so CAVE is the part that we're going to be talking about primarily here, because the things that we're doing is integrating training into CAVE. So CAVE is really the visualization aspect of AWIPS, at least for the WFOs and the RFCs. Now, NCEP has their own perspective as part of CAVE, so we're not actually dealing with that at this point, but just mainly the WFOs and the RFCs. So, so another kind of concept that, and I hope, since you're on the VLab Forum talk here, that you're familiar with what VLab is. And we're going to be using VLab for part of this project. So part of the project resides on the WFO or the RFC's AWIPS 2 platform, in their CAVE, in their visualization window. And then the other part resides on VLab. And VLab really consists of 2 pieces. VLab has VLDS, which is the Virtual Lab Development Services. And then it also has Virtual Lab Collaboration Services. And the development services are really focused on people who are doing development, people who need tools to manage software and versioning and code reviews and issues and bugs and bug tracking and things like that. The part that we're going to be dealing with is what's called Virtual Lab Collaboration Services, VLCS. And VLCS is really, it's a way for communities to be built, and those communities have wikis and forums and document libraries and web content and things that they want to share together to organize a group. So if I had a group of people and we needed to, kind of coalesce and keep together a bunch of information and keep our group kind of, up to date on what everybody's doing, we can start a VLCS community, and we can start sharing documents and updating things in there. So, so we're going to be using the VLCS portion of Virtual Lab, and the main aspect of VLCS is to support science sharing, training, and like I said, teams and groups to get together and kind of sort of self-organize. So we're going to be using that to host the content and to provide searching and things like that. So why do we need this? So currently, right now, so I used to work in a forecast office. I worked at WFO Huntsville as the information technology officer for about 10 or 12 years. And one of the things that's, you see when you're in a forecast office is that AWIPS is our forecast system, which is there on the right, let's say. And most of the training material or reference material that they have access to resides on a PC on the LAN. And those two things are not, they're not the same machine for sure. So if the forecaster wants to go look at some reference material, they have to kind of roll over to a machine that's right next to the AWIPS workstation, look at it, and then roll back over and then, do the comparison. So if they're trying to compare, hey, what does an IR satellite image look like, when we have, we're shooting tops or something like that, they have to go over to this PC, look at it, and then go back to the forecast system. And, there's a distance of a couple of feet there. And, that represents a problem, I think. The material is not available on the system that they, are doing their forecasts on. Also, there's a thing called the WES, the Warning Event Simulator, and the WES is in a little bit better shape because the WES is usually, well, it used to be on the LAN. I don't believe it is anymore, but so that would be helpful in terms of they could bring up a browser and and go and look at training. But the whole idea of the WES is to train the way that you work, and so we wanted to be able to have that training available on the WES as well as the forecast platform. So right now there's kind of a break in where people can access training and reference material. Another thing that they do, that an office may do, is they may print out certain training materials. I've seen this done too. You print out handy sheets that, we had these at Huntsville where you print them out, you laminate them, and you put them right next to the workstation so you can have them in a paper copy. Well, obviously that's great and everything, and it's really accessible very close to the forecast system. The unfortunate thing is it's not on the forecast system right next to it, which is, a bummer. But two, if somebody needs to update that, then they have to go find that document, update it, print it, laminate it again, and then replace all the copies at every workstation. So that seems a bit tedious. And sometimes the developer of those training is not at the office. They're at a region, or they're at, a cooperative institute, or an entity like NASA Sport or something like that, where they're not in the same building, or they're in some other location. So we want to essentially lower the barrier between the forecast system and this reference material. We want to be able to have that reference material available where the forecaster makes the decision. So why is this a problem? Well, one of the things that the Warning Event Simulator really hammered into everybody's brain, and I think it did a great job, was that you train how you work. And if you train how you work, then, or you have your reference material where you work, then when you go to do your work, you're well suited to do it because you've done it on the system that you're going to be doing your work on anyways. So we want to be able to have reference materials available on the system that they're going to be making these forecasts on, whether it's the WES or it's AWIPS. Current system doesn't have integrated reference. Right now, AWIPS 2 in Cave, there's a help menu, but that's mostly focused on kind of the knob out Cave and how to, turn on and off looping and, save a file, save a procedure out to a file and things like that that have to do with how Cave works, not necessarily the products that are in Cave. So the other thing is we want to have the materials on the decision-making system closer for comparison. One of the things, I've been a part of doing R2O for a very long time, since I started in the Weather Service back in '96. And the thing that I've always have had hammered into my brain is that if you provide somebody a new data set, if you can't provide it on the system that they're going to make the decision on, then it's going to diminish the usage of that data set or that reference material. So I think that applies to reference material as well as data. I mostly saw that with regard to if we're going to introduce some new data set, let's say it's a new numerical model, and you make it available on a web page. Well, the forecaster is not using the web page to make their forecasts. They're ultimately using AWIPS and GFE. So you want to make your model data available on the platform that they use to make their decision, because it just increases the chances that they're going to use it in their forecast operations. So I think the same thing applies to reference material too. If I was going to make a decision about fog, and I had a fog product that's a satellite image, and I don't look at it very frequently because we don't have fog very frequently, if I have that reference material there on my system that I'm going to be making my decision on, I can quickly query it, compare it right there on the same system with the data as I'm looking at it in AWIPS, and I can make decisions, really easily. Right now, there's currently no easy way to search available reference and training. Like I said, it's kind of spread out across lots of different places. So right now, one group may develop one training, another group may develop another training, and so on and so forth. And we could do that to the N number of places that create training, from regions to the local office to everybody. And there's no way to say, hey, what's been developed for fog training? Or what's been developed for interpreting radar velocity? Okay, there's you could probably find like the DLOC stuff and stuff like that, but you're kind of limited in what you can search, and certainly search in all in one place. So we want to take that data and put it into VLab and have it concentrated in one place. What it also allows us to do is not have multiple people developing the same training or the same reference material. So if I develop a training to get my forecasters ready for severe weather season, I could make that available on the VLab, integrate it with AWIPS, and then other offices could discover it and say, hey, that's pretty cool. I'd like to build off of that sort of thing. So that's kind of a way for, on a national level, for us to kind of not stovepipe develop training and reference material. I'm using training in a very loose interpretation. I'm not talking about a 2-week or a month-long course or something like that. I'm talking about mostly things that are very short, like things that are like almost reference material kind of quality of training. So if I'm using training, I'm not talking about residence courses or full-on training courses and things like that. So one of the last points here is that reference material, sometimes the ones that are less frequently applied, sometimes are hard to find. Sometimes they're hard to remember where they were. So if you make weather has cycles, obviously. So if you have your winter weather coming up, typically, an office gets ready for winter season by getting all their training in order, making sure their staff is trained up for winter weather, and then making sure that all the reference material that they need for that season is available and close to the system. Well, that takes a lot of time and effort and things like that. So why not organize it all in one place, and then it's just there. And if you update it in one place, and it's available everywhere. Okay. Some of the other issues that I wanted to address is I don't want to impose another set of training development tools. I don't want to say, hey, you developed all your tools in some web technology. I want you to throw all that away, and I want you to develop it in Word or something like that. I want to have basically, one set of, let's say you're going to develop a reference material. Well, you can develop it in PDF, or you can develop it in HTML, and those things will work with the system. So, I want to have a system that, doesn't impose another set of training development tools. And another thing is that some materials are only regionally or locally useful. And when we search for training, we want to be able to somehow filter out training that is only regionally or locally useful. So if I'm in the southeastern United States and I'm looking for information on interpreting IR satellite imagery, I don't probably want to look at what what Alaska region has developed, maybe because their how the data looks and how the interpretation is done is maybe slightly different than what it is for the Southeast. So maybe you want specific materials that you can apply in your area and your weather regime. So, so we want some way to be able to filter out things that are regionally or locally useful. We want to provide a way for materials to be reused. Again, I said that I don't want, we don't want materials to be stovepiped and nobody knows that, some site developed some great winter weather kind of reference and nobody knows about it except for that site and maybe the sites around it that heard about it and, in discussion between the sites. We want to be able to make sure that all sites can leverage those materials if need be and sort of percolate things up up the chain if we need to. And we also want to be able to provide feedback on materials. So materials like these reference materials don't live in a vacuum. We want to have the developer of these, put them out there and then get feedback, like, comments or ratings or things like that. So here's the basic idea. So this is step number 1 of accessing the training. Let's say I'm looking at a product here, and it happens to be Buffalo's reflectivity data. I would be able to right-click on that menu, the product legend in AWIPS, which says KBuff 0.5 reflectivity down there in the bottom. I right-click my mouse on that, and one of the new items that will show up on your menu is, and actually this has changed, it now says reference on that product. When you select that, the next thing that happens is you get a page that shows some search results. And the page will likely look a little bit different than this, but this is just kind of a mock-up here. So you'll get your search results will be shown in in kind of a table, and you'll be able to kind of sort and search through those. Sort them by title, by who created them, how many rating, what's the highest rated, the length of time that the forecast or that the reference material is slated for, like if it's 10 minutes worth or it's 15 minutes worth of reference material. Maybe you want to only find stuff that's really short. You want to just look at something that's really short. So this is how you would access the training. You're presented with a web browser that has some web content in it, and when you click on, now this is where it's kind of a little bit of a fudge here, is that I clicked on, I right-clicked on reflectivity, and now I'm showing fog product. But so if I wanted to actually, if I was doing this in reality, I would be presented with training materials from, or reference materials from reflectivity data. But so now I'm presented with these options of training or reference material that I can look at. I could also examine the comments that people have put in here and things like that. But I could click on that Sport RGB fog module, and once I do that, then it brings up that Sport RGB fog module, and I'm able to interact with it and use it, and kind of go through it and see what's in there. Maybe this is a PDF that just has what to look for and some examples or something like that, or maybe it's a GIF animation or something like that of the data. So people could interact with the reference materials here, and when they're done, they just close down the browser and that's it. If they want to go back to look at the search results again, they can just click the back button. Everybody knows how to use a browser now, so you could click the back button, go back, and go through the rest of the materials and then find the one that you really want. So what's really happening behind the scenes here? So so the trainer essentially here on the left develops training and reference materials, and then they will put that on VLab. They'll integrate it with VLab, and And then once they do that, then essentially they'll register it with this reference system. And then as soon as it's registered, it'll have some keywords, and those keywords will allow the forecasters to then query and find that data from AWIPS. So the benefit, the user initiates a search but can change the parameters. So if you right-clicked on the fog product but you really wanted something else, you could obviously go in and change the parameters in the search and change, you know, all sorts of different things like criteria, and then you could redo the search, and all from the browser. Then you could sort the material in various different ways, like you know, obviously you could sort it by how well it matches your keywords that were sent. By the way, in AWIPS, when you right-click on a product and you select that product and you initiate the search from there, it takes and figures out the keywords that should be used dynamically within AWIPS based on the legend name and the data URI. And it sends all those to the server to kind of narrow down the search. So it does that dynamically as the forecaster uses it. So, so you could also sort by length of training material or the source or something like that, or you could sort it based on comments, how many comments have been put in for this particular material, or the rating. You know, I want to see, just like on Amazon, I want to see the products that have 5 stars, not the ones that have 1 star. So you can sort them either way. So I said earlier that we evaluated this at Operations Proving Ground in spring of 2016. At that time, it was called the Just-in-Time Training plugin. When I was at Sport, we integrated it into the OPG system we were doing an evaluation of RGB satellite imagery that we were putting together at Sport, and we also put together a whole bunch of training on RGB satellite imagery, and we integrated that into the training system, this AWIPS reference system, and the forecasters, you know, got to use it real time, and so they use it just like they will. And at OPG, they use AWIPS just like they would in a real-life forecasting kind of situation. And the forecasters were shown how to use the plugin to access the training material. They were given a little bit of training on the training material, training on how to access the reference material. It's not very hard. You just right-click on the menu and you're off and running. So, and the feedback that we got was that it was a resounding success. And we even had a forecaster, several of them, that asked, you know, how they could get that plugin at their site, you know, as soon as possible. So they, you know, they really felt like it was a good thing, a good positive thing, you know, to help out their office. So, so the AWIPS integration, the software was delivered with the 16.4.1 baseline. So it was put into 16.4.1, and that right now is in testing. So we met the software delivery deadline, and we're right now working on the VLab interface, which, you know, we have to have done obviously by the time 16.4.1 hits the field. We have to obviously have that done before then so we can test it and all that sort of stuff. But you know, in the AWIPS plugin, we have it all configured to call the right place within VLab and provide the parameters that we need. And so now we just have to develop the VLab interface, and we're working on that. And it'll be appearing in offices in early winter of 2016. So the actual schedule is the 8th of December of this year. So how do training reference developers add content? So they go onto VLab, and they basically create their reference material on there. And VLab has a thing called journal article. That sounds like a very formal AMS kind of thing, but it really is just kind of a word for a web content within VLab or within LifeRay. And they create their content within there, and once they do that, then they can go in and fill in a web. There's a separate web page that you can call up to then add that to the reference system. and you just have to provide, well, the title comes from the actual title you used in the adding your training or your reference content. And same with the description and keyword tags. Those all come from the actual training or reference material when you add it to VLab. And then there's some additional things that I think are useful for the application that we're applying it to, and that's duration of the material and the source. So the original material has an author, but it doesn't necessarily have a source, like who that author works for at the time. So this is data for Sierra or for Sims or Sport or something like that, or this is from MDL. So you have the ability to identify who the source is, not just the author. And then also provide a thumbnail image of the product, of the reference material that'll show up in the results. And some other interesting features of this that can be also managed with, you can manage your training within your own community. So if I have a satellite community, I can manage my training there if I wanted to. And I'm going to talk about each of these other things here in the next couple of slides. So geotagging of training, that sounds kind of interesting. Ratings, comments, versioning, and flexibility. So the first is manage your own materials within your community. So on VLab, there's communities like the satellite community, the radar community, all sorts of different communities, and they may develop their own reference material and want to link it into AWIPS. So they could go in there and add the materials into their own community and then make them available to the system. So so that's kind of nice. So you can be kind of the owner of your own domain as far as your community. Geotagging of materials. This is kind of an interesting thing in that, if I'm in Alaska and I develop some training, it may not be applicable to Florida, or the southeastern U.S. And so you can apply sort of the extent of where this training is, made for. If you think it's something that has more of a national appeal, you can, make it the whole globe or whatever. But if this really truly is a data set, a reference material that's only applicable to a place, then you can make it so, and then when people search for it, they'll still see the results, but they can filter out essentially anything that's not in their area if they want to. So, so ratings and comments. VLab itself has already an existing rating and comment system, and since we're using LifeRay within VLab, we get that benefit on these journal article content, this web content, and so you can kind of natively already go in and rate or add comments to material that's already there. And so the nice thing is that, so if a user is not on AWIPS, they can also go to VLab and they could also look up this training too, or this material also, so they could access it when they're in a cubicle working on training, or they have an X shift and they're not doing forecasting. They could access it there too, and they'll have access to the same things, the ratings and the comments, or they'll be able to comment or do ratings while they're over there also, as well as on the AWIPS system. And that really provides feedback to other users and feedback to the training and reference developers. So if I created the thing that I think is the greatest thing since sliced bread, I put it out there and then it gets 1 star and lots of nasty comments, then I maybe have some reasons to revise my training or my reference material and make it better. So VLab also has versioning. So as you update your content, you can go in and update it, and it will automatically version it. So you can roll back to a previous version if you need to, if you made a mistake, or if you need to maintain 2 versions, you can do that. So so that's a nice thing. The material developer, since they are in charge of the content, they can easily provide updates to their stuff, and it immediately shows up with everybody who wants to use it. And the material developers, essentially the way that people find your training is they do it through tags. And those tags can be adjusted by the material developer also, or the community owner, or whoever is managing the reference material. And like I said, users can view it inside and outside of the AWIPS system, so they can view it on the local LAN also. So with that, that's it. There's my email address if you have any questions, and I guess at this point I'll answer any questions.
All righty, Jason, thank you very much. That was a very stimulating presentation. For those on the line watching us virtually, if you have a question for Jason, please use the GoToMeeting raise your hand feature to so indicate. Or you can also enter a question in the question area. And for those in the room, we'll start with folks in the room. Does anyone have a question for Jason?
I do.
Go ahead.
This is Dennis Miller from the Office of Water Prediction. I know when I do a web search in general, sometimes you just get swamped with information, and it can take some time to figure out which is worthwhile and which isn't. How is it decided, let's say vetted, what products are worthy enough to go into this database that you use for training, and which ones aren't?
Right. So it has the option one of so obviously there's training or there's reference material that is maybe nationally vetted that is endorsed necessarily by some group that is the group that is in charge of that kind of information. Like let's say GOES-R, for example, GOES-R, they're going to be the source of any material that would be in GOES-R, and they're going to be vetting that. Well, they can be created, a community can be created, and they can be put into that role. Now we can also say this data has been sort of vetted by let's say the OCLO or WDTD or something like that, where it gets kind of a stamp of approval, and the end user can filter out anything that isn't that, or they can just choose to look at all results. So you can imagine a situation where, let's say I'm a forecaster at WFO Huntsville, and I've developed this great reference material for some kind of product within AWIPS, and I could put that on the VLab and I can make it available, but we would want some way to make sure that OCLO, if people want to get official things from like GOES-R in particular, like for a GOES-R kind of reference material, then we want to be able to say that, hey, this is the official document, and we want to provide the end user some way to basically filter out data based on whether it is officially vetted or not. And then on top of that, we also don't want to restrict, if I'm at Office A and Office B has produced some great reference material, I don't think we want to necessarily restrict them from discovering that Office B turned out this great reference material, and it could be very helpful at our office too. I think the thing is providing flexibility for filtering, as well as some like officially vetted kind of stamp of approval kind of thing, so that you can filter and not filter when you want to.
So are you saying that if an individual at let's say a forecast office decides that, hey, this might be a good reference, they can just put it in the database and let the community decide whether it's worthwhile or not?
Yeah, I mean that whole process has yet to be sort of fleshed out, but I think essentially for one thing, we want forecast offices to be able to contribute their own reference material, because a lot of times they have forecast problems that are very unique to their area, and they may have very specific, like for instance, when you're at a forecast office, you do a familiarization trip, usually around your community, and find out like what are the areas that are hard to forecast for, what are areas that have hazardous conditions like flood potential and things like that. those are things that are very specific and could be provided in a reference material for an office, and we don't necessarily want to restrict them being able to provide that material to their group inside of AWIPS. But we also realize that, you know, there are officially vetted kind of entities that maybe like a satellite, approved national satellite group that would vet any sort of satellite material. And let's say we had a satellite community in VLab, they would become the official, you know, vetting for satellite material. And so if it is going to get the stamp of that community's approval, then, you know, it would have to go through some process as deemed by them. So, so the idea is to have some sort of stamp, but not also not like restricting, you know, people from being able to provide their content if they feel it is locally applicable.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's go to a couple questions we have from online participants. First, Michael Magzig wanted to clarify the situation regarding the availability or how the WES2 is linked to AWIPS, and he says it's now on the AWIPS network. So for the record, the WES2 is available through AWIPS on the network. Also, Brian Mata would like to know, the SREC and AWIPS regional development focal points had comments and stipulations about implementing this functionality. Were those provided to you?
The SREC and what was the other group?
The AWIPS regional development focal points group, I guess.
Okay. You know, I had a lot. I don't know if I was specifically told that it was that group or not, but you know, I had you know, we talked with a lot of different people to get requirements. We also had to go through a design review with AWIPS, with the AWIPS developers in the development community, and so some of the modifications that we made came out of that, as well as feedback that we got when we gave a presentation. This is a presentation that Mike Magzig gave, and that was one of the main things that came out of that was the sort of vetting of you know, material, and so the material needed to, if you wanted to give it like an OCLO or some official entity's approval, it would need to be vetted, and then there would be some designation that that reference material had been vetted by them, and then therefore when a forecaster was going to query the database, they could filter it based on you know, whether it was in that state or not. So, you know, if you wanted to see what the official reference material was for the Weather Service, you know, you could easily find that. It wouldn't be necessarily buried below, you know, all of the other content that could potentially be in there. I don't know if that's what he was talking about.
Right, Brian. If that did not specifically answer your question, you may want to give him a call. All righty. Thank you, Jason.
My mind also, maybe that occurred a while back, and I just don't remember the exact specifics of it, but.
Alrighty. I guess Michael Magzig wanted to comment that Jason and Mike from the OCLO briefed this to the SSD chiefs and got vetting of the plan. So I think you may have mentioned that, but okay. Jim Calkins has a question for you, Jason, and he's been unmuted. Go ahead, Jim.
Hey, Jason. Just a quick clarification. Am I correct that this is intended to kind of complement the WES, or is there a stronger direct tie to the WES?
So no, it's supposed to be a complement, and you know, like I said, and I think Mike clarified this. The WES used to reside outside of AWIPS, and it used to reside on the local LAN, and so, you know, providing training content via maybe like a local intranet or something like that, you know, was a method that people had could put materials and make it available to their forecasters while they're using the WES. But since the WES has been moved inside of AWIPS, that's no longer a viable situation. So, this will end up complementing the WES in that way. So
okay, just that's what I thought.
The WES is built on the new WES is built on AWIPS 2. So things that work as far as plugins in AWIPS 2 in Cave will also work in that same GUI. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim, for the question. Anyone else in the room have a question? All right. Great. I've got a question for you, Jason. So you've got these communities within the virtual lab developing training content that they want to see displayed on the AWIPS when a user right-clicks. What sort of mechanism or how is it that they go about actually doing that? So I create my web content, and then what happens next if I want to have it displayed within AWIPS?
So at this current time, nothing, because there is no functionality within there. That's just in the development at this point. But when it's enabled into the production VLab, what you'll do is you'll essentially bring up another display, and within VLab, and you'll say, I want to create a new AWIPS reference record. And then it'll ask you to select the web content that you want to apply. And so you'll click on a button. It'll present you with all the web content that's in your community. And then you just click on the one that you want. And then you provide some of that ancillary data, like who was the source. Obviously, the author comes from whoever put it on VLab. And the title and the description come from that same location. When you put it on there, you have to provide a title and a description. And then, you provide a duration and a thumbnail. And then when you click submit, then it adds it into the database. And then as soon as they click submit, then it's in the system and it's available for lookups. And so, so at that point, if somebody was to access it 2 seconds later, then they could find that result, and then they would see that this new data, this new reference material is maybe available for them. And then, like let's say later on you determine that you want to take that down. You don't want to have it out there anymore because, I don't know, you found out that you didn't like it, or for some reason you need to remove it. You could go in and manage your list of items that are out there, and delete them, or update them, or whatever you want to do.
Okay, cool. So this really, I think, drives home the fact that there is going to be sort of a QC issue, that virtually any content can be made available to the forecaster when you right mouse clicks. And so being able to filter that, maybe even have the default filter come from a sanctioned source, might be a pretty important feature, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, we can make it so that the initial default is to only show sanctioned things, or maybe sanction things and things from their local office. So some of the data that we're shipping between Cave and VLab are your keywords that you want to search on that come from the product that you clicked on, the site that you're at. So whatever your site, your WFO or RFC site ID is, and then lastly, what the extent of the view you're looking at in the display is. So that material would be used to find materials that are relevant to your location. So if you're looking at Florida, that extent would be sent to VLab so that it could decide if that is relevant to the training that is being looked at.
Alrighty, let me take a pause here and remind folks that if you have a question, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you so you can ask your question to Jason directly. And while I'm talking about that, Mike Maxig, if you have the ability to talk, I can unmute you and you can make some of these comments and ask some questions if you so choose. So if you would send me a message, ask a question, and let me know that you can talk to your speaker, I'll unmute you. One other question I have while we wait for some additional questions. Oh, okay, hold on a second. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, I'm using my internet or connection, so am I coming through clear?
Yes, we can hear you quite well.
Okay, I was just going to point out a little bit on the West 2 Bridge. So West 2 Bridge is on the AWIPS network, but the access to the VLab hasn't been provided there yet. So obviously we have a lot of training and a lot of training references in the VLab that we're making for people to use in operations, and we really need to get that available on West 2 Bridge so when they take their training and we're training them to use references, that they can use them like they're going to use them in operations when they need to reflect on things and such. So we have made a request to the AWIPS program senior management to get the West 2 Bridge machine added to the machines that have the access from that will be able to access the VLab, but right now that's just not the case.
All right, thanks. Jason, one other sort of follow-up question. So you mentioned in your presentation you recognize that there is a tremendous amount of training material already out there in various places. Is there going to be a concerted effort to go out and harvest that information and bring it into the VLab, or will you just do it sort of as as it happens to evolve?
I don't know. I don't know if well, I certainly haven't been involved in like any sort of concerted effort to do that. But obviously, I think there's groups that are more than excited to be able to get their sort of training materials or their reference materials in front of people who are using their products. In particular, I can think of, like, of course, for instance, the GoesR community. They're going to be launching the satellite, and when they do, there's going to be all these new products that are going to be available, and some of them we haven't seen yet, really in the forecast office. So there's for a while, there's going to be like a need for kind of help with interpretation, and so they have developed a whole bunch of one-page or they're actually two-page quick guides, and I could see that they want to put those in there, and I know the Mike Johnson's group and Joe Zajic in particular, they've been wanting to get that sort of stuff in the VLab and connected up to the system for testing. So, other than that, and talking with Mike at WDTD, we haven't really talked too much to very many other people about, hey, you got a whole bunch of stuff ready to go. So I don't know. That'll be an interesting thing. I think it's maybe an organic thing. Once it gets started, and if we can provide some, sort of training, it's kind of funny. I got to have training on the training system, but having training on how to add stuff to the system, would, I think, be very beneficial. And,
I can add a little bit to that. We already have a lot of, I think OCLO right now is probably leading the way in terms of designing references for use in AWIPS, and we've got a whole course of AWIPS fundamentals that we're migrating into the VLab, and we'll have it available for quick reference. So I think we're planning on having OCLO materials, an extensive amount of OCLO materials on the recent changes that we already have in there with our references, and then our main course when 16.4.1 rolls out. And so that will be kind of a starting point for getting something right out of the box that people can use that will have the OCLO kind of it'll have the tag for OCLO, and we'll hopefully have some priority in being able to see it. But I don't envision a lot of people jumping in and just throwing stuff in there right away. I think it will be somewhat organic. We are bringing in someone from this year to develop training for how can the SUs in the field use the VLab, and one of our deliverables is going to coincide with this time for how do you use the VLab for accessing the GoZAR materials, how can people get started in doing some simple web content development and just the basics of the VLab. So OCLO has a plan to do some training on the VLab, and this is going to be, I think, a real cornerstone of the end-to-end kind of training experience that OCLO is going to be fostering. I think over time, another year or two after this is fielded, I think we'll see a lot of people will have the references and training they need to be able to use it, and then you'll see certain groups will be kind of leading the way with it. So I expect a lot of things from it over time.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Any questions? Let me check real quick. Any questions online that you'd like to ask Jason as we begin to wind down here? Raise your hand. Alrighty, I got one last one here for you, Jason. So, one of the things that kind of excites me about the VLab is this concept, and you've embraced it in this tool of being able to provide feedback and ratings. And we haven't seen a tremendous amount of use of that now, or at this point. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how you were going to structure that to sort of maximize the chance of having a lot of feedback. For example, will people be able to provide their feedback anonymously, or will there be incentives for providing feedback, such as a ranking on how much feedback you provide, that sort of thing? Or is there any ways you could see to gamify this so that we could really up the amount of feedback on these articles?
Yeah, I mean that's a tough thing, like if you provide a way for people to to provide feedback, there's people that will provide feedback and people that won't, and the one thing that I think is a little bit different about this interface than just the straight VLab, as far as like people going in and using VLab for collaboration services, is that it's directly linked into their into their AWIPS system. And so I mean, forecasters don't typically have a lot of time when they're doing their forecasting, and I don't want to give off the impression that there's going to be these huge modules in here where people are going to be doing forecasting and reading pages and pages and pages of stuff, but this is really meant to be a quick guide. And so maybe this is a time when they will be able to have feedback. And I think those sort of feedback mechanisms really only help people make decisions if people provide information into them. Like if you went to Amazon and there were no reviews on a product, it doesn't really help you decide if that product is good for you or not. You have to have some kind of way to, if there's 100 different products, you have to have some way to sort of delineate what it is. And sometimes when people find stuff, a little nugget, they want to be able to tell other people that, hey, I found this one really useful. And so I think one of the things that when I was at Sport, one of the things that Sport does a lot of is they don't just give a product to an end user and say good luck with that. They give it to them and they ask for feedback on it, and they kind of, I don't want to say ping on people, but they repeatedly ask for input. Like, we know you're busy, but could you please provide us feedback, because this is going to help us make this product better. And so I don't know what that mechanism is to, because obviously it's harder to do at a national level. And it seems to me like if you provide the mechanism to do it and the mechanism is very easy, then it becomes easier to it becomes easier to use, and or more people will use it, I guess is what I'm saying. If you make it really complicated and hard, then people aren't going to use it. So I'm not saying that the current way it's implemented in VLab is hard or is implemented poorly. That's not the case. It's just that maybe in that case, there's so many people that are spread out across different communities. At least from my observance, that the total amount of people in each community is lower. So, but like we get a lot of questions that pop up in the forums on AWIPS, but we also have an AWIPS2 dev list that also tends to pull people away from making forum requests on the AWIPS list within VLab. So there's a lot of competing technologies out there, but this will lower the barrier for them to provide input back. Because before, if you wanted to look at the reference, let's say we provided a reference on a website and they had to go over to the machine that was on the LAN, look at it, and then go back to their forecast on another machine, the chances of them giving feedback is going to be very low, because after they look at the training and then go to make their forecast decision or go back to forecasting, it takes a lot of effort for them to move back over to the training machine because they're distracting from doing the forecasting. They're actually taking their eyes off of the forecast while they're over there. So this essentially lowers that barrier. They have that stuff right on the machine where they're making their decisions, so they don't even really, like if they're watching watching something develop like satellite imagery or radar imagery, they don't necessarily have to move to another machine to kind of go, oh yeah, I need to look at this reference material and refresh myself on how to detect rain snow line or whatever. So so that I think we're trying to lower that barrier to people giving feedback, and I think if we lower that barrier, then that will help with them being able to provide feedback.
Alrighty, well, great. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time sharing with us some information about the AWIPS reference training plugin. And I want to thank everyone for attending this afternoon, and remind you that our next meeting, next forum, will be September 21st, and we'll hear a presentation about testing multi-model ensemble systems for prediction on weeks to season-long scales. So be sure and check back with us next month on the 21st. Have a nice afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.